2/27. And it my sobriety date is February 27th, 2019, and it has been a ride full of ups and downs, and this program and all of you have definitely shown me, and my higher power as well have definitely shown me how to survive. And not just that, but that's what I was drinking. When I was drinking, that's what I was doing, is I was just surviving, and trying to figure out the next drink, the next drug, the next person, and taking hostages and all these things. A little bit about my story. One of the things that has affected my sobriety, and my sobriety has affected it, is that I am transgender. My pronouns are he, him. I identify as male, and also my mental health as well has been a really big thing, that has greatly affected my sobriety. And I know that both those things that I just said, I cannot be happy, joyous, and free if I don't put this program first. And I know that if I ever decide to just that I want to drink again, or I want to use drugs again, I know that I will die. I know that there's always another drunk, or another relapse, or whatever you want to call it, in me, but I don't know if there's another recovery. I am definitely, I'd say I'm definitely a type A personality. Like, I will run and jump and get into whatever it is. And as soon as I walked into my therapist's office after being released from a psych ward, where I looked up at the ceiling, and I thought that that I was just this major pothead that may or may not have overdosed on Klonopin a few days prior, that also went into the psych ward high, because that's what people do. They go into psych wards high. That I thought that I would just want smoke a little weed and be done, and that's not what I wanted. When I looked up at that ceiling, I knew that I wanted to drink. And I was one of those people that would go into the therapist office, and my therapist would tell me, well, I'm really worried about you, and come see me 2 times a week or 3 times a week. And I was not a good employee. I would constantly call out, and then because I have been diagnosed with anxiety and a couple other things that are considered as disabilities, I would go to work and use that as a crutch, and know that it would be a lot of legal ramifications if they were to fire me. But then I would work around my schedule, or whatever the case was, really because I needed to use. And it wasn't that I just was so sick, or all these disabilities were going on. And some of the time it was, but a lot of the time during my drinking and using, I was just out there. One of the things that my sponsor that I had, that was the first person that took me through all the steps. So I did have a sponsor before that, and just to ramble on a little bit. I immediately thought, when I walked into these rooms, that I couldn't get sober because I was trans. I couldn't get sober because I was African American. I couldn't get sober because if you had the life that I'd had with parents that were unreliable, and I don't take anybody else's inventory, but they may or may not have had things going on with themselves, that they may have needed some outside help for. It was something that if I were to characterize it, letting go of these old ideas, of how I thought that my life should be. Because for me, I started transitioning at 17, and I knew immediately that if I was going to continue to transition, I would need money, I would need insurance, I would need a job, I would need all these things. And so I am definitely one of those people where I'm not I'm not afraid of hard work. I'll complain, of course. That's what every good alcoholic does, but like somebody I met in the program, that has definitely told me something that stuck in my mind a little bit is, I refuse to complain. And that is one of those things for me that, even when I complained and I was doing the hard work, to make sure that I had a job and all these things, that it was that, I was, like it says in the big book, I had arrived. I was 19 years old, living on my own apartment, my own car that was a year older than whatever year it was at that point in time. That I'd had the money, had the job, and I wasn't happy and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I remember too that, just like Bill W, tried exercise. And I was like, okay, yeah, let me try some exercise. And I was in high school, and I remember just this thought dawned over me that everybody else is on this wavelength that I just don't know what it is. And I couldn't figure out what that was. I couldn't figure out why I would, even as a child, I would just get this fear and this anxiety in the pit of my stomach. And I couldn't figure out how to solve that. And I remember when I first got drunk, I was 12 years old, maybe 13, and my mom had a friend over, and they were drinking, and I remember it was vodka. And I remember I went to the fridge, and I was like, okay, like, yeah, like, I'll drink a little bit of this because they seem to have fun. And I remember my grandma growing up, she would turn on some Janet Jackson or Anita Baker or whatever it was, and drink a little brandy and call one of her friends through landlines back when we had landlines. And I was like, okay, like, this is all, even too, watching movies growing up, like Coyote Ugly. I thought that, that's what drinking and partying and all these things would lead to, like, this joy. And I drank that first drink, and I was like, this is gross, I don't like this. But something in me continued to drink, and even from the very beginning I drank alcoholically. And not to continue on, but as I drank and I felt that feeling rush over me, I knew that I had arrived, that any kind of worries, any kind of cares, were gone. That, I didn't have to be somebody that I felt like I had to be. I didn't have to be the smartest, but then I felt like the smartest, or I felt like the most handsomest, or I felt taller. I felt like all these things, like I just had this confidence, this liquid courage. And I blacked out. And when I woke up, I was in my room. The mirror was cracked. My forehead had apparently hit the mirror in the blackout, and cracked the mirror. I had a gash, a little Harry Potter gash on my forehead. And when I woke up again the next morning, somewhere different in the house, I thought that, this is over. Like, I don't ever want to feel like this. And, my dad had called me and it told me, write out all that I will not drink again or whatever 1,000 times. And, being a little kid, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll write that out. And none of that stopped me from drinking again. And I would even party with family members, especially my mom. We would party together, and I'd party with her friends or whatever. And every time I drank, it felt like I was the most handsome in the room. Like I just had this courage, and I could talk to the pretty girl or handsome guy or whatever it is that I need to do, that I could do that. But then after that faded, I was left with that fear, um, that anxiety, all those things that made me once again feel like I was on this different wavelength, and I just couldn't seem to get it, no matter how much I drank. And I was especially one of those people that, I loved a good self-help book. I would read all kinds of books, to get into, my psyche, because I thought, well, it must be, that I just have a lot of trauma from growing up through some of the things that I went through. Like, it must be that. And I'm not to say, it didn't affect things that went on, but it wasn't just that. And for me, this alcoholic, it wasn't just being able to sit in the therapy office. It wasn't just, going to my psychiatrist and being on these medications. It wasn't just, trying to seek outside help. I needed something else. And I realized once I came that it was AA. And my sponsor that had originally first taken me through the steps, she had told me, she said, I don't know what your story is. I don't know what you've been through or anything like that, but I know that you have these days where you feel like you can't breathe. And for me, feeling that and knowing that, I don't know this woman. It's just this little soccer mom driving around a 2006 RAV4. Like, I don't know how she seems to know whatever this is. And the sponsor that I had prior to her, he felt a little bit uncomfortable sponsoring someone that was trans, because I've been open with all my sponsors about that. And he felt a little bit uncomfortable because there were drugs in my story. And so, so I wound up having to go and meet this new sponsor. And I remember meeting her and being upset because, here I am, this guy, and I got invited to this women's meeting, and I'm sitting in this meeting and I'm just crossing my arms and everybody's, being all nice. I'm like, well, why the hell am I here? And the room is packed and apparently it's a birthday meeting. I didn't even know what a birthday meeting meant. And the last the last seat that was left was right next to me. And as soon as she walked in, there was just this electricity. So I've been praying, God, please show me who my new sponsor needs to be. And I just had this feeling like it was her. And she sat right down next to me, and everybody went around whose birthday it was, and they spoke and told their story. And she had told her story, and she had this look in her eyes, and she was tearful. And it's for me, for this alcoholic, and having people that in my lives that were alcoholics and addicts, it is very easy to turn on the waterworks and, I'll never do it again. And, for me, tears do not, if anything, they piss me off. And looking at this look, she just had this look in her eyes, and I knew that there was something that was different. This wasn't anything. Like, I don't know what she was smoking, snorting. I don't know what was going on when she was drinking. I just knew that whatever that was, that I wanted that. And I walked up to her after the meeting and, told her that, I wanted to figure out whatever the sponsor thing was. But I told her, I was like, I'm trans, I'm going to be an issue. And she just looked at me and smoked her cigarette and said, are you an alcoholic? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, are you going to go to any lengths? And I said, yeah. And she was like, well, and I told her, well, I got some other meetings to go to. I will figure this whole thing out or whatever. And she gave me her number. And I don't remember how I know, but I remember it was a Wednesday. I know she gave me her number on a Wednesday. And by the time I hit Thursday, I wanted to drink. And I knew either I could call her and tell her that I wanted to drink, or I could just go ahead and drink. And whatever it is in me, I knew what drinking made me feel like. I knew what waking up and hating myself and not knowing what the issue was and trying to dance around it. And I knew what all that was. And I was willing. I was honest with her and open-minded as much as I could be at that time. And I was willing. And I called her, and we started going through the steps. And during my first year of sobriety, I wound up getting my medication right. And I got to about 9 months, and I was like, what's going on with this? Like, I don't know. I don't know if this is for me. And she told me, and it's really stuck in my head, she told me, she was like, hey, do you, like, how are you going, if you continue down this path of using drugs and alcohol, your medication that you are working on tweaking and doing all these things, all of that goes out the window if you decide to pick up and use again. And I don't know what it was, but it just clicked. And I knew what it was like, for me, mental health wise, to see things that aren't there, to hear things that aren't there, to be in a deep dark depression. I didn't want that. And so I was willing, and I did exactly everything that she said. When I got to about 9 months sober, I realized that the biggest issue that I had and why I was still feeling like shit was that I wasn't connecting to a higher power. Like it says in our How It Works, he could and would if you were sought. No human power could relieve our alcoholism. And it didn't matter how many meetings that I was going to. It's great to be a 1 hour wonder and to say something that sounds nice, or to listen to something that sounds nice from someone to go, yeah, well, I really liked it. Let me trade numbers with you after the meeting. But not reaching out to other alcoholics, not really doing service work. I wasn't connecting to you guys, because that's my problem. Is I have this disease of perception, this disease of connection, where I will connect to you, or I won't connect to you. I won't connect to anybody or anything unless I have a drink or a drug or something else that's going to take me outside of myself. And I really loved, I heard at a meeting that, when it talks about, you start working this program and doing all the things with a sponsor, because, I have worked this program with a sponsor who has a sponsor even now. And it says rocket into the fourth dimension. This is the fourth dimension. This is reality that I get to be here for. Because all the while, that I was drinking and using, I was just trying to check out because reality was too painful. There were too many things. There was too much trauma. There was too much having to go back and forth with doctors about medication. There was too much, religious trauma, especially, that I was like, why would I want a higher power? Why would I want a God in my life? And and then I believed in something, and the higher power my first year was just this gray blob. And then, and I kind of kept that gray blob and just started connecting. And once I started connecting to this higher power, my life changed. I saw things differently. I did 1, 2, and 3 a hell of a lot on any issue that I had. And then, of course, going to my sponsor and things like that. And before I made any major decisions, I went to my sponsor about it. And, when I was wrong, I promptly admitted it. And sometimes, that promptly might have been a couple of days, but I had this weird thing called a conscience. Like, things felt bad. And it wasn't like, the shame and guilt. It was like, I know that I feel good every other time when I don't do this thing. And it's not to say, that I'm a bad person or anything like that, but recognizing that my humanity and that I'm flawed, and that I get to work on those flaws. And I don't think that I'll ever be perfect. But my current sponsor, she always says, I'm perfect, but I just need a little work. And even too, with a higher power, my higher power has been so many different things. Went from Minnie Riperton, like come to my garden, Minnie Riperton, to the Hawaiian guy that sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow, to now there's the screensaver that I have that kind of reminds me of my higher power. But connecting to a higher power and really working these steps. And sometimes I don't do it perfectly. I do I don't even know if you can do the steps perfectly besides in order. But I know that anything that I go through today, the problems that I have, are not made because I said something wrong to someone because I was drunk, or I didn't show up to work because I was high the night before and I just want to get high again and maybe go to work on Wednesday instead of Tuesday. Those are not my issues today. But I also know too that every single morning and every single night, with the exception of if I get in really late or something like that, but even still, I end and start my days with prayer and meditation, because I need something higher than me. I need something outside of myself to continue to show me the way and to continue to just light that path up for me and help me do the next right thing. And I didn't get here overnight, and I got here with the help of you guys too, with coming to these meetings and listening and sharing, even when I didn't want to share. And I remember, too, I lied to my sponsor in early sobriety, and I told her I was feeling like drinking that day, and she told me go to a meeting and let them know and see what and tell me what they say. And I said, okay. And I went to the meeting and said, well, I'm having a hard day. And I, she called me the next day and she said, how did that meeting go? And I said, well, I didn't hear anything. And she said, and you told them that you felt like drinking? I said, yeah, I did. And so she hung up and she called me right back and said, I know you're a goddamn lie. and you know, she's this little petite chick from Georgia, and you know, the Georgia accent came out, and I'm originally from Sacramento, but the Georgia accent came out, and it wasn't this anger. The next words that she said after that were, I love you. And for me, having someone tell me that they love me and shown up for me at every single point, um, in every single situation that I brought to her, through my fourth step, through my fifth step, through the amends process, that this was somebody that I didn't have to do anything special to gain or receive love. That this love that especially everybody in the rooms offered me was unconditional, because all my life I had been offered this conditional love, that it was conditional if, you know, if I, you know, gave my drug dealer enough money, I would get enough drugs. If, you know, I showed up to the party early, you know, I could dance with whoever, do whatever. Um, that you know, people always wanted something from me. My job wanted me to be there on time, like, you know, of all the things, um, that here in these rooms, the only reason you loved me was because I was a person and because I had the same disease as you. And even if I didn't feel like I had that disease some days, you told me to come anyways. And the love that has been poured out on me, I honestly, I can't even begin to put it into words. And, you know, one of the things that happened a little bit later into my sobriety was when I hit about a couple more years sober. You know, my medication stopped working, and I needed some a little bit more help. And once again, you know, I found myself using these steps, and I found myself calling my sponsor and doing all that it took. And you know, every year of sobriety that I have has been completely different. I've heard, you know, your first year is physical, your second year is emotional, and your third year is spiritual. Um, and I do believe that pain is the touchstone of all growth, like it says in our literature. And you know, some of the pains that I went through my first year and being completely crazy, like, you know, I thought that my first year, how crazy I was, I thought that it would make the perfect sense financially for me, even though I was self-supporting at that point in time, would make perfect sense to marry this pregnant woman that I met at my IOP and have her and her boyfriend move in, and I can claim her and the baby on my taxes, because, you know, clearly that's what you're supposed to do, right? Um, and you know, taking this up with my sponsor, and my sponsor, you know, just laughing and being like, oh my gosh, keep coming back. And you know, deciding not to do that after, you know, careful reconsideration with the sponsor and everything. um and two, you know, even being there for my sponsor, when I hit about 9 or 10 months sober, my sponsor came to me and said, you know, hey, I think that um my child may be thinking about transitioning, and I was wondering if you could talk to them. And had I not have been sober, had I not have, you know, went through all the things that I went through, I wouldn't have been able to be there for her. And then to my first year sober, I was able to go back and see my aunt that I hadn't saw in over 10 years. And one of the first things, or one of the things that I did while I was there, was I went to a meeting, and I ate some German chocolate cake that one of the men there said his ex-wife may or may not have poisoned, but he wanted to, you know, give the gift that keeps on giving, and share in the AA meeting. And like I said, my third year and stuff, my medication stopped working, and you know, I had to start doing electric convulsive therapy, which you can Google it. And you know, I learned about that because someone else in AA that I knew uh, had done it. And every single ride that I had there to and from at 5 a.m. in the morning or 5:30 a.m. in the morning was people from AA. When I had my knee surgery, and it was for a congenital issue as well. And you know, as I'm having issues with that knee, and I go into the doctor and find out that the bone graft cracked and the screws are coming out of my leg. And I'm in the ER and I walk across the street and I break my ankle on the opposite side. Every single ride to and from, everybody called me from AA. I went to Zoom meetings in between my physical therapy because I couldn't figure out how to get into my house because there were steps and I couldn't walk for about 6 or 7 months. All the doctor's appointments, all the physical therapy appointments, everyone from AA that I knew because I had stuck around, because I had did service, because I had talked to people, because I had called people that I didn't even really talk to, really showed up and brought me meals because, you know, it's kind of hard to make meals when you can't walk. And I mean, I had a little ankle bike and things, but moving around the kitchen and all that, that was really hard. And I stayed sober through it because I knew that a drink or a drug was not going to fix my issue. But most importantly, even on my bad days where I'm like, you know, well, fuck this. Um, I knew that the love that I felt in these rooms through my higher power, through all of you, was something that I didn't want to give up. Um, and I'm very, very thankful for everyone that has shown me love, that has shown me compassion, that has been with me, that has cried with me, that has talked through things with me. Um, I don't want to leave. And I pray that, you know, if the thought or the idea ever comes to want to leave, I pray that I call another alcoholic. Thanks.